Hello legends, in this video I'm going to show you how you can get this widget onto your website so that when you click it open you can have a conversation with your custom GPT. I'm going to show you how you can add a custom GPT to your website using no code tools. So you don't need to know how to be a coder, you don't need to be a programmer, we're not going to be hosting anything on any servers. We'll be using no code tools like Voiceflow, make.com, and then we'll be using an OpenAI assistant. The custom GPT is the front end consumer product that OpenAI released. They also have a back end product which is the exact same thing, which allows you to pull that custom GPT out of this interface and then deploy it pretty much anywhere you want. So that backend version is called OpenAI Assistance API. And then using a bunch of these different functions, we're actually able to deploy that custom GPT to our website. And if I scroll through this, you can see there's a lot of code over here. Now, once again, I'm going to show you how to do this completely no code. So to outline all of our steps today, we'll be building out the actual assistant in Voiceflow. And you can see here that we have 1, 2, and 3 blocks. So this is the entire Voiceflow build, just 3 blocks. Then we'll be building out the make.com scenario. And this is the scenario over here. So make.com is what's going to be managing all this complicated code for us. Again, we're not going to have to know how to code anything up. And we'll be building out 2 flows. One flow for brand new conversations. So if a brand new user goes onto your website and starts a chat with the widget, they'll initiate a brand new conversation. And for as long as they message the exact same agent, we'll actually create a persistent thread for them so that we'll have memory in the conversation and we won't be creating a new thread each time. And then I'll show you how to create your custom GPT using the OpenAI Assistance API, which will be super easy, and we'll be able to put in our custom instructions, choose whichever model we want to be using, and then add a bunch of files to the assistant, just like you would for your custom GPT assistant. And then our last step will be to deploy this custom GPT assistant to our website, which will be super easy using Voiceflow's web chat integration, where we get a code snippet that we just copy and paste into our website, and then it deploys a widget that looks exactly like this. And we'll be able to customize things like this icon, the coloring here, the name of the actual chat widget, this icon as well. Okay, so the first thing for us to do is go to voiceflow.com and create a new account. So voiceflow.com will be managing our chat experience, and it's going to allow us to deploy the actual chat widget onto our website. So just click sign in if you already have an account, or create a totally new account. And then once you're in your dashboard, just click on new agent. I'm going to call this GPT. I'll choose chat for the modality and then just choose English and hit continue, then create agent. I'm going to go ahead and delete all this stuff because we don't need anything here. Now the first thing I want to do is have a welcome message. So I'm going to go to talk and message. Let's call this welcome message. I'm going to right click. Then I'm going to choose a blue color for this block. And I'm going to say, hi there. Then I'm going to go to the left-hand tab and click talk, then drag a message block into here as well. Then I'm going to type in, ask me a question. So these 2 messages are going to be the static messages that our user is going to see when they first open up the chat widget on our website. I'm going to go back here and click listen and get the capture step, drag it into the block. And then using this capture block, I want to be able to capture the message from the user. Now the next thing I want to do is scroll down to this dev block and click on function. And I'm going to call this make.com API call. I'm going to right click this and then make this green. So this function is going to be used to communicate between Voiceflow and make.com. To build this out, let's go back. Then let's click on functions. Let's create a function, choose template. So just choose hello world for now. Call this make.com API and backspace the description. And let's go create function. And this is where we'll be building out our function. So I've already built out this function and all we need to do is copy and paste it into here. So let's go to my GitHub, go to the repository section, and this is the function that we're going to be copying. So let's click into this, click onto this function. So when we copy this function, make sure you copy from line 2 to line 59. And now that we're back in Voiceflow, let's just erase all of this and paste in our new function. Awesome. So now we need to adjust some of these settings here. So we're going to change the input variables. We'll be adding some output variables, and then we'll be changing our paths. So these are all of our input variables that we need to map into this function. So we have thread ID, last utterance, and make URL. So I'm just going to copy these functions one by one and then paste them into here. So let's go thread ID, paste it, last utterance, paste it into here, and make URL and paste it into here. And then next we have 2 pathways. So we have a success pathway if this function is successful. So this is going to be an API call to make.com. So if the API call is successful, we're taking the success path. And if there's any error, we're taking the error path. So we need to be sure that the error path is one of our paths over here. So let's add a new path and call this error. Just a quick note that these names, so success and error, have to be spelled the exact same way in the exact same case as what you have over here. And then you can see this variable here called output vars. So this is the output variables we're mapping if we take the success path. And we have thread ID and then message. So I'm just going to copy these output variables of thread ID and message and then map them over here. So let's go plus to add these variables in. I'm going to copy thread ID, paste it in. I'm going to copy message, add a new variable, paste it in. And that's it. So now we have mapped all of our input variables, we have our output variables, and then we have our success paths. And just quickly to run you through what's going on in this code. So we're mapping our input variables of thread ID, last utterance, and make URL. We're then checking that the variables do exist. So if we don't map one of the variables, we're just going to get an error in the function telling us, hey, you forgot to map something. Then we're making an API call across to make.com, sending in our thread ID and user message. Then we're using a try catch block, which is starting from here where it says try, all the way down to here where it says catch. So the try is basically trying this API call. And if the API call is successful, we're taking the success path. But if anything messes up in this API call, then we're catching that error in this catch block, and then we're going to be displaying the error to the user. All right, so we're all done over here. Let's just go and click on workflows, then double click on home, and now we're back in our flow. So now we can click onto this space here and go to our drop down and click make API. And now we've installed that function that we just wrote into this block. So if you click again onto this space here, we've got a bunch of variables that we need to map as the inputs to this function. And then we need to map some outputs of this function. So just quickly, the thread ID, last utterance, and make URL. So what are these? So thread ID, as you guessed it, is the ID of the thread. So every new conversation gets a new ID. And then for every ongoing conversation, we're just using the exact same ID. That's why we're mapping it into here. Last utterance is the message from the user, so the person that's interacting with the chatbot. And then make URL, when we get across to make.com, we'll be creating a webhook over there so that this API call can actually target the make scenario. Finally, the output here, the message is the response from the assistant. This is what we're displaying to the user. And then we're mapping our thread ID back into the Voiceflow canvas. So in order for us to be using these variables in this Voiceflow conversation, we actually have to create them. So let's go back again. Let's click on variables this time. And in the top corner, let's click on new variable. So the first variable that we need to create is the thread_ID variable. Let's click create. Let's create a new variable. Now we need to make the make URL variable. Let's create that. Next variable is going to be the message, which is the response from the GPT. All right, and that's all the variables that we need. Now let's go back into workflows. Let's go back into home. Now let's click onto this make function. Let's start mapping in our variables. So click into this space here. Let's open up the curly brackets and type in thread and just choose this variable. Now we're mapping the thread ID to the thread ID variable within the function. Next, let's map in the last utterance. So this is just going to be the exact last utterance that we're using over here. So we don't need to create a new variable for this. Next, let's map in the make URL. So just type it and then click it from this option. Now let's map in the message. So open up squiggly brackets and scroll down to message, and then thread ID. Let's map that again as well. Perfect. So now we've mapped all of our input and output variables. So one thing to notice that we need to initially set a thread ID. For new conversations, it's going to be empty. So we need to set a thread ID that is empty. And we also need to set a make URL. So to do that, we're going to go to this logic button here, click it open and get this set block and drag it into our welcome message block. I'm just going to backspace this and then replug it to the top. So now if we click on the set variable, we're going to open up a panel on our side here where we can set initial values for the variables we're using in this flow. So if you click plus, let's go into this variable space here and scroll down and find make URL, which we don't have just yet. So I'm going to put a blank placeholder here. So I'm going to go open up quotation mark and I'm going to say URL and I'm going to close the quotation mark. And then I'm going to click on plus again and add a new variable. And this variable is going to be the thread ID. So I'm just going to search for the thread ID, click it open, and the thread ID initially is going to be empty. So I'm just going to type in 0 and then close the quotation marks. As a best practice, I always just click into this white space after I set this variable. And it kind of locks it into place here. If you just click out immediately, it's not going to save the variable here. Okay, so now we have the variables created. We have our opening messages for the conversation. We're capturing the message from the user. We're then sending that message to our make.com scenario. And once we receive the information back from the make.com scenario, we then want to have a talk step and then send another message back to the user. And now over here, I'm just going to be mapping that variable. So I'm going to open up the squiggly brackets. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to find message. And again, message is the GPT response from this make.com API call. So I'm just going to click into this white space here to lock that message in. And as you can see, now we're going to have a message back to the user, which is going to be the GPT response. But actually, I also want to add something else here just for development. I wouldn't do this on a front end. I'm going to click back into here, hit enter, and then directly underneath this, I'm just going to do squiggly brackets and I'm going to type in thread, choose thread ID. And again, I'm just going to click anywhere else. And now you can see that we have message and then we have thread ID. So I'm just doing this so I can show you guys that every new conversation is going to have a brand new thread, and then every ongoing conversation is going to have the exact same thread. So now I'm going to call this user message. I'll right click on this and I want to make this orange. So after we display the message to the user, I also want to capture a next message from the user in case I want to keep having the conversation. So back over here, I want to go to listen, grab the capture block, and then place it in this user message block. And now all I need to do is just create a path here. I'm going to go all the way down to actions, click go to block. And then over here, I'm going to scroll down, go to home, and then find this make.com API call block, which is over here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to capture the message from the user. We'll be sending it across to make.com. We're going to display the response from the GPT back to the user and then capture another message from them and then send that message directly back to make.com to have an ongoing conversation with our custom GPT. So back in our plan, we just built out the Voiceflow assistant. So I'm going to put a green tick over here. Now the next thing I want to do is build out the make.com scenario. So now you want to go to make.com, and make.com is another automation platform where we'll be able to interact with our custom GPT without writing any lines of code. So log in if you already have an account, or go ahead and create a new account. After you've logged into your account, go ahead and create a new scenario. So the first block we want to create is a webhook. So let's choose custom webhook. So this webhook is like a phone number with your friend. If you want to call your friend, you have a specific mobile number you have to dial. So this webhook is going to give this scenario a specific phone number that Voiceflow is going to dial whenever it wants to interact with it. So first time setting this up, let's go to add and let's call this Voiceflow make webhook and let's click save. So we've just set up a custom URL that we can use to target this scenario. So I'm going to copy this address to clipboard and then I'm going to click OK. Back in Voiceflow, I'm going to paste in that URL for our set variables block. So I'm going to open this up, go to the URL. And then over here, we had URL before. I'm just going to backspace that and replace it with the actual URL. All right, so let's save that here. So let's test that this works. So I'm just going to right click on this node. I'm going to click run this module only. And then back in Voiceflow, I'm going to hit start and just type something random in. So hi there. So let's hit enter. All right, then we got an error response, but don't worry about that for now. Let's go back to make.com. Perfect. So we were able to send our thread ID and user message from Voiceflow to make.com. Now the next thing you want to do is add a flow control module and then install a router. So just like at the start of this video, I mentioned that for new users, we'll create a new conversation thread, and for existing users, we'll just use the ongoing conversation thread. So now we're going to be creating a pathway for brand new conversations here, and then for existing conversations here. So let's click onto this little wrench button and then set up a filter. So now I'm going to call this new conversations. And then in this condition step, I'm just going to pull in the thread ID. Then I'm going to scroll down and choose does not contain. And then I'm going to type in thread and underscore. So this is the actual formatting of the thread ID that's generated from the OpenAI assistant. And over here, we're basically saying, as long as whatever we're passing as the thread ID doesn't contain this, start a brand new conversation. This basically means that we have no thread ID. So now let's hit OK. Now let's set the exact same filter up here, but this time we're going to use the condition does contain. So let's say ongoing conversation. For the condition, we're going to choose thread ID. Then we're going to choose contains and then type in thread underscore and then hit OK. Now that we have both of our routes installed, let's click on our next node and type in chat GPT. We'll be opening up this OpenAI module and we're going to be choosing message and assistant. So the first time you set up this module, you'll be getting a similar fail message. And all this means is we have to make the connection between OpenAI and make.com. So to do that, let's go ahead and click add. I'm going to call this make-OpenAI. Now we need to get our API key and organization ID. Okay, so the next step is to go to platform.openai.com. And then if you have an account, just sign in. And if you don't have an account, just sign up. So I'm going to sign in now. Once you're signed in, let's go to the dashboard. Then on the left-hand side, let's go to API keys and click create new API key. I'm going to call this make-OpenAI, create the key, copy the key, and then click done. Back in Make, let's paste in the API key here. And now we need to get our organization ID. Now back in OpenAI, let's click on the settings button, make sure we're in general, and then we can find our organization details here. And this is our organization ID. So let's copy this and paste it into here. Now let's click save. Awesome. So now we're connected to our make.com account. The next thing for us is to actually create an assistant, so it shows up here. So back in OpenAI, let's click on dashboard, make sure we are in assistants, click on create. Awesome, and now we have our placeholder for the new assistant we want to create. So let's just put in a name. I'm going to call this custom GPT. For instructions, just put in the exact instructions you had for your custom GPT. I'm just going to be putting in, you are a helpful customer support assistant. You can choose your model over here. I'm actually going to choose GPT-4o Mini. Next, if you want to add some knowledge resources to your custom GPT, you just click this file button. I'm going to click upload, and I want to be adding in some FAQs that I generated for a made up store. Click open, then I'm going to click attach. Now the files are attached to this assistant. We just need to toggle the file search button on. So when you've toggled it on, it's going to turn green. And now we've just created our custom GPT using the OpenAI assistants. Back in Make, let's click on this assistant tab here and our assistant should pop up. Perfect. So this is the assistant that I created, custom GPT. I'm going to click it. Then the next thing I need to do is send the message to the assistant. So I'm going to click this open and I'm going to use user message. So this user message is what we received in this webhook that came in from Voiceflow. So that's the last utterance from Voiceflow. And that's all I need to do. So now I'm just going to click OK. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is create a new module and we want to click on transform to JSON. So when you're making API calls or sending webhooks, the data that you're sending has to be in a specific format. So what we're doing here is just taking the data from here and preparing it so it's in the correct format so that we can send it back to Voiceflow. So in this JSON module, we're just going to click into here and then we're going to click on result, which is this first item here. And then we're going to click OK. So now we're taking the result from here, we're preparing it so we can send it to our webhook. The next step we want to do is now type in webhook and click on webhook response. So the webhook response is what's going to enable us to send the actual response back to Voiceflow so we can get the response from the custom GPT. Okay, so let's start building our response. We're going to open up with squiggly brackets. Then we're going to put a quotation mark and we're going to type in message, close the quotation mark. So when you guys are following these steps, write it exactly as I write it. Then we'll put a colon, put a space, and now we want to input into here the JSON string. Then we want to put a comma, then we want to put another space, and then a quotation mark, type in thread, close the quotation mark, another colon, another space, and then open up the quotation mark. And now we're putting in the thread ID from the ChatGPT step, close the quotation mark, and then close the squiggly brackets. Okay, so just a quick note. Over here, we're putting quotation marks around the thread ID, but for the JSON string, we're not putting any quotation marks. So when we convert the raw response from here into a JSON string, we're putting the quotation marks around the string already, so that when we feed the variable into here, it already comes pre-installed with quotation marks, and we do not need to double up on that. But the thread ID doesn't come with quotation marks, and that's why we have to install them. So now I'm going to click OK. So now we want to replicate this exact flow, but for the bottom over here. So I'm going to go to ChatGPT, click on message and assistant. I'm going to scroll down and choose our connection. Awesome. Now I'm going to choose our assistant, which is the custom GPT over here. I'm going to feed in the message. And for this pathway, we want to feed in the thread ID. So this is the ongoing conversation, which means we already have a thread ID to feed in. So now I'm going to click here and feed in the thread ID, then click OK. Then just as above, I'm going to be parsing the response from the assistant. So I'm going to click on JSON, transform to JSON, then I'm going to insert the result over here, click OK, and now I want to have that webhook response. So I'm going to go webhook response. Okay, so let's build out our variable here. So we're going to squiggly brackets, then we're going to put message, close the squiggly brackets, colon, put a space. Now we're going to insert the string, we're going to put a comma, then open up the quotation marks, type in thread, close the quotation, put a space, open up the quotation marks, then put a colon, and now open up the quotation marks, click into the box, and we want to get the thread ID, close the quotation mark, and close the squiggly bracket. So let's click OK. And now let's click save for our scenario. Awesome. So now make.com is built out, and I actually want to test this out to make sure it works. So I'm going to go over here and click on run once. So back in Voiceflow, let's give this a go. So I'm going to click start, and let's type in hi there. Let's send this. Okay, so it looks like we have another error again, and our make.com scenario is still running. So this is the same error that we had at the start. So I'm not sure why it initially worked, but it's not working now. But let's troubleshoot this together. So if it wants absolute URLs, let's click onto our set variables block and see if we need to backspace these quotation marks. And let's give this another go. So I'm gonna go hi there and hit enter. Okay, so it looks like it's working. We should be getting a response back. Okay, so we have an issue, invalid or missing response body from the API call. Okay, let's go back to make.com, and it looks like everything executed correctly, and we even had our body over here. So let's just double check everything was set up correctly. Actually, let's go to advanced settings. That's one thing that I missed, sorry guys. One thing I didn't do is actually install headers for this API response. So we have to install content type headers and just basically say, hey, this is gonna be a JSON data set that we're returning. So I need to go content-type, and over here, type in application/JSON, and then the exact same over here. So I'm gonna go advanced, add an item, and I'm gonna go content-type application/JSON, then hit OK. So now let's save this scenario and hit run once. All right, let's give this another go. So, hi there. Okay, let's hit enter. Perfect, so we have our response. Hello, how can I assist you? And then we have our thread ID. All right, so everything works. So let's go to make and actually turn this on. Now this is on and running. Okay, so coming back to here, we've just built out the make.com scenario and we've also created the custom GPT. Okay, so let's add a green tick here. So this is done, and another green tick here. This is also done. Now our final step is to deploy the GPT to our website. So back in Voiceflow, let's go ahead and click back, then click on the settings tab, then click on the integrations tab. Next, click on web chat, and we need to paste the snippet on our website before the closing body tag. So I'm gonna copy the snippet, and over here I have a sample HTML file that generates me this mock-up website. Now I'm gonna find the closing body tag, which is here, and I'm going to insert my snippet. So I'm going to Control V. Okay, awesome. So now our widget is loaded onto our website. Before we interact with the widget, let's go back into Voiceflow. Okay, so back in the Voiceflow canvas, now to make that widget live, let's go ahead and click publish and publish. All right, so now everything is ready to go. Let's go back to our website and now interact with this widget. So I'm gonna open it up, start a new chat. So these are our static messages. I'm just gonna say, hi there, hit enter. Hi, how can I assist you? What are the opening hours? Awesome, so we have the thread ID here ending in CCK9, which is the same thread ID over here ending in CCK9. Now if I close this assistant, and I'm gonna simulate being a brand new customer, so I'm gonna start a new chat. Before we had CCK9, so I'm just gonna say, hi there. Awesome, and now we have a brand new thread created. Before it was CCK9, and now it's different. So the final thing we might wanna do is go ahead and go to our settings panel, click on this integrations button again, click on web chat, and now if we scroll down, we're actually able to change the name of our assistant. So I'm gonna call this Sunny Creek Outdoor Supplies. You can change this message. You can change the welcome message. And I'm just gonna say, ask me any question, exclamation mark. And we can see that the changes are being reflected in this. So we can see the changes are being reflected. Now you can customize even further by changing the color here, and then any of these icons. Now back on our dummy website, let's just reload the page, click on the widget, and now we can see the changes reflected instantly for our chat widget. All right, that was the final step. All right guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to deploy a custom GPT to your website without using any code at all. All right, see ya.